call this meeting of the Finance Committee to order. All members of the committee are present and accounted for, along with Alderwoman Finlayson. We have a few different grant approvals and two pieces of legislation. The Rules Committee just spent time on 0317, the annual city budget submission. I know Alderwoman Finlayson is a sponsor of that and has another meeting to get to, so unless there's some objection, we can just take that first, and I think we'll probably just be adopting the package. But since Alderman Payan wasn't at that meeting, if you'd like to talk a little bit about the legislation and what the amendments were, that'd be great.
I'd love to. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This legislation is to put us in line more with practice. A number of years ago, a group of us sponsored legislation that would require the bargaining with our unions to be completed in time to impact the mayor's budget, so that what is negotiated, the financial issues, would be considered and included in the budget. Over the last several years, we've kind of strayed from that process. And so for the last couple of years, at least, the mayor has presented his budget without including those items that were negotiated, which leaves the council trying to scramble around, trying to come up with the funding. And so this legislation simply moves the date of the mayor's budget presentation from March to April, thus giving the city an opportunity to receive from the comptroller's office our revenue projections. And we learned from Ms. Lehman at the last meeting that by state statute, the comptroller's projections have to be in by February 14th. And so knowing that, then, the mayor will then have a month, 6 weeks before his budget. If this legislation passes, it would give the mayor about 6 weeks to include whatever's negotiated in his budget. So it would move the mayor's budget presentation to the first council meeting of April.
So at the Rules Committee, we looked at the language and came to the conclusion that it was a little more complicated than it needed to be. And so if you look at the Title III change, which is in paragraph D, we're going to recommend an amendment to this legislation that says that the union agreements be submitted to the mayor by the third Monday of the month, and get rid of all that other bolding. Third Monday of the month of March, so as to allow the fiscal impact of any negotiations, And then in Title VI, the same kind of change, that we're striking all the bolding and saying that the mayor's budget would be submitted the second council meeting of April.
First council meeting, right?
First council of April, right. Second Monday, first council meeting in April. And the Rules Committee passed those two amendments. I would offer those same two amendments to this committee. The general thrust, as Sheila said, is that we can't be having the mayor's budget come in without having the benefit of both knowing what the comptroller's data is on the revenue side, and should we be so lucky as to have negotiated union contracts, factor in whatever was agreed to, at least in principle, by the mayor and the union contract. So we're trying to allow more time, which is all hinged on when we get the data from the comptroller for our biggest revenue source, which is property tax.
Plus, you buried the lead, which is the Finance Committee only has to go through their exercise one less month. Right?
I know. That was another benefit, yes. Which, by the way, Alderman Budge does have some concerns about. He's not here, but he expressed that, and next year will be many people on the council, maybe all of us will be gone, and there'll be a new council. And one of the things that Alderman Budge liked, hear this, department heads, is the dog and pony shows from all the department heads, which, for the first 7 or 8 times you hear it is good, and then after that you kind of feel like you got it. But in any event, the changing these dates will certainly put more time pressure on the council getting its work done.
But it, you know, from my perspective, listening to the conversation at the last committee, it makes sense because it's closer to reality, basically, of where we've been and where we should be, instead of sort of what we've had on the books for a long time that's may not be as tied to reality. So, Alderman Paone, any comments or?
Nope.
Okay, so we have a motion.
I move those two amendments. Cindy has them from the Rules Committee, but essentially changing the reporting date from the union negotiations to the third Monday in March, and the mayor's budget being given to the council, the first council meeting in April.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 And unless there's any other amendments, we have a motion on the full recommendation.
I would move, we recommend approval to the council of this legislation, this ordinance, as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's go back up to the top and pick up sort of regular order here. The first bit of business is approval of the minutes of our last meeting of the 17th of January.
Mr. Chairman, I have had the opportunity to review the minutes. I would move for their approval.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. And then we have four different grants here. The first is, we'll just take them in order unless there's some reason not to. GA 2217, Anne Arundel County Transit Subsidy, FY17. Welcome.
Good evening. Rick Gordon, Director, Department of Transportation. I come before you this evening seeking your approval of the Anne Arundel County Office of Planning and Zoning grant to the City of Annapolis in support of transit services in the amount of $635,000.
Do you have any questions for Mr. Gordon?
How much was that grant last year?
I believe it was $385.
Thank you.
Trend in the right direction? I just need a 1 in front of it.
I move that we approve.
Okay.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Easy enough. Thank you.
Sorry being so tough.
That's quite all right.
The next one is GA 2317, Leadership and Community Resiliency Program. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Sharon Kennedy. I reside at 9 Randall Court, Annapolis, Maryland. I'm representing the Historic Preservation Division, City of Annapolis. And as I do on all occasions before testimony in the council, I am married to the Ward 1 Alderman. Go easy. I've never done this before. Okay. These, do you want to take them as a pair, or do you want to?
Sure. Yeah, let's do that. Talk about both of them, and then we'll
Okay.
get into them.
These are two grants basically in support of the upcoming conference called Keeping History Above Water, which is scheduled for October 29th through November 1st here in the city. The first one was in Newport last year. This is an ongoing series of conferences that we've been selected to host, and these are two grants that have been awarded to us in support of that. The first from the National Trust is a $5,000 grant. It does need to be matched. It'll be matched out of existing grant funds from FEMA, which are supporting our Weather It Together program. And the second is the National Urban League, I think it is. That's a $10,000 grant, no match required.
Thank you. So in this conference that's happening at the end of October, obviously, so we have, in real dollars, $30,000 towards it. What's the expectation of the total cost of doing it? Do you have an idea of what we're...
I do have a current budget. We're anticipating plus or minus about $150,000 in registrations and support, vendor sales. We're going to have a section where people who actually sell products that can save buildings, and those tend to be very large things.
Sure.
So about $150,000, and then the costs are going to be just under that. It's going to be a break-even proposition, basically. We're not going to make money, but we're planning on bringing about 240 of the best and brightest on this field into Annapolis.
Excellent.
In a shoulder season, I might add, after the boat shows have left.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Alderman Paone and then Alderman Arnett.
What exactly is the Community Resilience Program? I read through this, and initially, I thought it had to do with the youths of our community, and, I mean, they never really explain anything. They talk as if we're all supposed to know exactly what this program is, and
My understanding is it's a new initiative by the National League of Cities, and they're giving $100,000 out this year to 10 cities, each getting $10,000. And it's to support efforts at the local level to deal with how we stay resilient in the face of bad events, whether it's hurricanes or sea level rise or earthquakes or kind of any bad thing you can imagine happening in a local situation. And so it's all about how does the community plan for it and then bounce back from it, both in infrastructure and economic development.
it's pretty general, isn't it?
Yes,
You know that guy?
I've heard of him, yeah.
So,
Sort of a phrase that, I mean, I think, my sense is that the people would hope that a couple years from now, everyone will equate that phrase with exactly
Yeah.
what we're talking about. It's just, it tells you how much work there is to do, right, in making this
Right.
a well-understood.
I mean, I read it, I thought it was like crime prevention.
So resiliency is renaming what was called for the longest time mitigation, which mitigation has sort of a negative context. And resiliency, and particularly in Newport, they couched it as, to the business community, as business opportunity. There will be lots of opportunities as we get into addressing sea level rise for the business community, new kinds of business. One of our big supporters here is Service Pro, and that's because they see potential not only after the fact, but preparation before the fact. So this is something Joe and I have been spending a lot of time working on, and you're right, we tend to use the word, not jargon words, but they're words that mean something to us because we were there as they got developed, but probably do need to do a little bit better of a job of describing what resiliency means. But doesn't it sound bright and sparkly, like having your teeth whitened, or, you know?
It's my state's attorney's background coming into play. I thought it was crime prevention.
It is. It's everything.
Okay, any other questions or comments on
I
these
would
two?
move that we approve both of these grants.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank
He's
you.
an aye,
I'm
too.
done? Great.
You're done.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. And the final one is GA 2517, Pump Out Boat Number 2. Welcome.
Good seeing you again. Welcome. My name is Andrew Patterson, representing the Harbor Master's Office under the Rec and Parks Division, and I'm the Assistant Watch Commander down there. And this grant, yes, is for our Pump Out Boat 2. We met not too long ago for the Pump Out 1 grant, but this is a secondary vessel in which we want to add to our fleet and eventually eliminating the Pump Out Boat 1. The grant is for $76,195. And as I stated, we eventually would like to get rid of the Pump Out Boat 1 due to just the amount of parts and maintenance and time and effort to keep the boat actually running for the general public. As you guys all know, the Pump Out Boat is a very high demand. We want to have it an everyday thing, and we can't do that all the time with the current vessel we have on hand.
Is one enough?
I've worked on that boat for 5 years, and when we have special events, a busy weekend, or if the boat can't run, I think a secondary boat is a very good idea.
Right. So do you want to get rid of Pump Out Boat 1 or make it secondary?
We're gonna, for this year, as of right now, we'd like to have 2. See how it goes, and then, you know, with the $70,000 grant that we already approved, we'd be able to cover the new boat's expenses. And like I was saying, just providing the service for the city is huge. We need to have that boat running all the time. If we don't, you know, we're going to hear it from the public right away.
How much does the $5 pump out fee defray costs?
Not much at all.
So would there be an incentive if pump out was free that more people would use it?
I believe so. After attending a couple port ordinance meetings, I know we're trying to lean towards becoming a no discharge zone and eventually making it a free pump out, or maybe an incentive if, you know, some of our customers come down and rent the city dock, well, have a free pump out. Or if you
Right.
rent a mooring ball, you get a free pump out. But other than that, all the local marinas and our general public here in Annapolis, they depend on us.
Well, we have our public works people here next, but a pump-out facility on city dock has been discussed in other veins as well. But it seems to me like we need to make them as available as possible and encourage people to use it. One of the things that the Severn River Conservancy talked about is not making pump-out free, but making a discount on using the mooring balls or slips to cover the cost of a pump-out.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
sir.
there's a lot of creative things going on in Fort Worth these days.
Yeah. Alderman Pam?
How many pump outs do we do a year?
It's all listed in the grant reimbursement. It depends. If our boat's running, I say last year we ran, you know, a fair amount of time, 3/4 of the year. I think we did almost 100,000 gallons of sewage. Number of tanks, like I said, it's all in the reimbursement grants, but it's near 10,000 tanks. And, you know, usually a regular customer or a person here in our marinas or local marinas, they usually have 1 or 2 tanks per boat. And, you know, they can vary in size. They can go from a 20-gallon tank to up to a 200-gallon tank.
Yeah.
Sometimes we, you know, pump out the Harbor Queen, and she can have, you know, imagine a lot of gallons. So it's very high demand.
What's the capacity of the boat, the pump-out boat?
I'm sorry?
What is the capacity of the pump-out boat? How many gallons can it take?
300 gallons. And
So could they could pump out the Harbor Queen or one of the other tour boats in
Yes.
one pumping?
yes, sir. I've worked on that boat for 5 years, and the gallon capacity is 300 gallons. So once we fill or come close to filling, then we dump it either at Annapolis City Marina or Annapolis Landing Marina or at a local marina, which has a pump-out station. As of right now, since it's you know, the winter time, we go down to Prince George's Street, and that's where we dump right into the sewage right there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
I would recommend approval.
Second.
I move approval.
And everyone gets kudos for staying away from the pump-out jokes, you know?
Yeah,
Just sort of
I know,
all
right?
business here. All
Come
in
on,
favor?
I know you got some good ones.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and then we're on to legislation again, 0217, the water service agreement for 44 Hudson Street. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Jim Beecham. I'm the acting director of Public Works, and I've brought with me your division manager for water and sewer.
Excellent.
Sure.
Welcome. So, and obviously the mayor's the sponsor of this. We don't have a sponsor here. If you want to give us sort of a brief overview, we've done a lot of these in the past, these agreements, but if, you know, just the broad strokes would be helpful, I think.
This particular project has been in front of Public Works for quite some time. It predates me by quite a bit. They are on the edge of the city limits. They have negotiated for public sewer with the county. There is a public water line running right in front of their property.
You press the button so it lights up brighter green.
Sorry about that.
There you go.
There was an 8-inch water line in close proximity to the site. They have executed a temporary water service agreement pending approval of this ordinance.
Okay.
Seems like a
Straightforward.
no-brainer to me.
Yeah.
What's the rate they pay?
3x our
3x,
normal
yeah.
rate.
Let's bring more in.
Can you sign anybody else up for that?
Okay.
So
Uh,
yeah, right. I would recommend approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Easy
You
enough.
got us on a
Thank you.
mellow day.
It's a mellow day, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so that exhausts the legislation. Mr. Finance Director, you have an
Can we
update?
take a second to bring up Joe? We did change
Yeah.
0317. We made the language very simple. none of this, the later of or anything else. We just said the union negotiations need to be done by the third Monday of March, and the budget has to be presented by the mayor the first council meeting in April. No relativity, no nothing. So, pretty, right. So thank you for your comments on that.
Mr. Finance Director.
Finance Director, budget is definitely,
Hey, just one second. Fred, where are we having lunch tomorrow?
that's your call, yes.
Well, the boatyard is closed.
I know, I suggested Eastwood Kitchens.
That's fine, that's beautiful. I'll see you at noon? All right, see you then. All right, and Vic Pasco's coming.
Good.
Yep, sorry.
More important.
Yeah, well, it's
It's a social
mine.
calendar, we have to spend a certain amount of
It's
time.
not social, believe me, this is not gonna be social. This is Eastport Shopping Center. It's gonna be a hot tamale.
Bring your gloves. Okay, Finance Department, well, we're still working to tie up the audit, the CAFR. We're looking at now, it's been pushed out to February 15th or mid-February. So hopefully that means by the end of February. I think I shared with you before, you know, there's going to be some fallout relative to this. But you know, that will be addressed after we get the audit and after the CAFR is put to bed, and then we can talk about that. We're looking at more of a global perspective. We did a procurement for a new consultant for the pension plan. We will be recommending 3 managers to the pension board, and they'll make the final selection. I don't know, Ross, if you want to make.
No, we
Ross
had
is
a lot
part
of
of the
people
selection.
apply. That was, we must have some attraction. Or we look like we're easy marks, something, I don't know.
Well, I mean, the reality is, Annapolis is always a good client to have on your resume.
Right.
So, yeah. But we did get some good results, and I am looking forward to making a selection here probably within the month. And so, more to come on that, and hopefully we'll start driving some other issues relative to that. The one thing that keeps percolating relative to pension, and which is going to impact the general fund, is the internal rate of return. We've talked about in this. We talked about at City Council. We talked about at the Financial Advisory Commission. But I want to get out ahead of it, in that it is a decision that we're going to have to grapple with. The fact that right today we are at a internal rate of return of 7.5%, and just to give you a framework what that means, for the actuarial valuation, it's assumed that the city will make 7.5% every year. And based on that assumption, that's what drives their revenue projections, among other things. And we know that 7.5% has not been the reality for years now. The consequences, if once you lower that assumption, the contributions have to go up. And those contributions come from 2 groups of people, the employer and the employee. So, you know, we're going to have to do sensitivity analysis relative to each 100 basis point change, or whatever we want to use as a basis change. But we have to have a very frank conversation relative to what that means to everybody, including the financial position of the city. So more on that, hopefully pretty soon.
What's the sort of the timing of that, trying to convene that sort of conversation, having that sort of, where we start to see it I mean, is that in the context of the budget being delivered next month?
No, it's not, it's not gonna.
It's not on that track.
No, it's not on that track. I think it would be, quite frankly, a little aggressive timeline. I don't think, I think it would behoove us to sit with our financial advisors, whoever that may be. I think we have to sit with the actuarial firm and understand what it is that we're wrestling with.
So the budget will come forward with the assumptions the way we've been doing them, and at some point following on that, you sort
Right.
of figure out whether you have to make a change.
Exactly, right.
But when do the new Gatsby rules go into effect?
They already have.
They already have.
Yeah.
So it really should be a budget discussion. And in conversations I've had with union leaders, they feel like they gave it the office with the last IBB. And on the other hand, we have to report this as a liability now, the shortfall, and changing the assumption. Now, one of the things we need to talk to Fiona about is we also have a 6.5% assumption on wage growth, which we've never approached either. So if you change that assumption, that should change our liability back in the right direction, right?
Yeah, there, and you are, you know, there are many different issues that we have to pull back the onion and evaluate all the assumptions. And we haven't done that for a long time now, not since I've been here anyway. So it'll be a good exercise.
Yeah.
Alderman Budge?
So if we are going to change these assumptions, who is the we that does the changing? Is this something the administration does? Does it come to the council? How does this work?
Well, ultimately, it's going to have to be approved by the city council. Typically, what happens from experience in other municipalities, the pension board, via its oversight of the investment, the pool will make a recommendation relative to what the two things, among others, but what the contribution needs to be and what the internal rate of return assumption ought to be. Now, that's other municipalities. I don't think there's any prohibition, if you will, relative to the city council or the finance committee or financial advisory commission, for that matter, talking about the issues and, you know, coming up with a recommendation, and or working with it in a concurrent fashion. But what I'm trying to do is put the issue on the table that, you know, as a responsible community, we need to have this conversation.
Thank you.
So for the finance committee this year, I would ask the finance department to focus more on the balance sheet and less on programmatic budgeting, since we don't use it anyway. But that's where this is going to show up. And it can get, it can take us from 90%, what are we, 90% funded now?
Yeah.
Down into the high 60s or low 70s, which all becomes more liability on our balance sheet, which is another thing that the bond raters look at. But it's also more important than that. It's an indication of our fiscal health. And I have to admit, I've not looked at it overly much, but I think looking at both the pro forma and the balance sheet is something that we need to get into doing more. Most of the CAFR looks at balance sheet stuff than
Well,
pro forma.
you know, if you recall, the Financial Advisory Commission did a white paper relative to measurements. And that's balance sheet, basically it's a balance sheet centric type perspective. When we adopt a budget, it takes a look at 1 year revenue and expenditures, but the balance sheet is a historical and a prospective function relative to the overall financial condition. So you're absolutely right. You know, we really need to understand what our decisions are relative to the balance sheet. We're going in that direction, in the fact that we're spending more time with fund balance policies and procedures and those fundamental things, but there's no reason why we can't expand the conversation relative to other financial benchmarks.
On
So-
the same topic, I know I want to go to, but the pro forma, the performance-based budgeting, the 87 categories, which we didn't choose, they were decided by the administration. And once the administration kept saying, well, just because you're a priority 4 doesn't mean that you're ripe for cutting, my response is, well, then what good is it? Who cares whether you're 1, 4, or 3, or whatever? And it is a lot of effort and a lot of extra paper. I myself looked at it a little bit last year. I looked at it a lot the year before, but I know Alderman Budge pronounced it next best thing to useless early on, and I think unfortunately he was right. So do we really need to see that from the Finance Committee? The Finance Department? Do you want to produce it?
Well, I'll say it this way. Now that the spreadsheets have been formulated, it's not.
Easier to produce it than what you've been producing about it.
Well, it's one half dozen the other. All the spreadsheets are linked, and it doesn't take much more. What takes more time is doing the data entry for each one of those programs, rather than.
But it's the categories themselves, the 98 and the 87 programs, that are virtually meaningless. You have all of fire as one category, and then you have smoke detector prevention or something as a little category. Look at Public Works, where you've got the storage of the maps and charts. One of it is a category 4, but are we not going to do that? Get real. They're in cabinets, so we're going to throw it away, and can we afford to? Now, with more and more of the, whatever that SADAR or whatever it is, the electronic stuff, it probably doesn't need to be in hard copy, but it just seems like it's a ruse. We really are not doing anything with it.
I'll put it this way. If the Finance Committee says, Bruce, we just want to see the pro forma in the traditional sense without the program budgets, I will relay that message. And
but if we say, we'll let you know if we want to see the programmatic budget, but otherwise, the pro forma, we have 1 month less.
Yes.
Joe, I carried your message that you did want to see, you wanted to talk to each of the departments, and that's fine, but that's that much less time we have. Yeah.
What we grapple with here is if we have just the line item budget, then we go into a sync of sitting down with the departments and trying to understand what they're spending all their money on. A line item that says salaries doesn't help me understand what's going on. So from that perspective, the programmatic budgeting does help us with that level of understanding. I'm not sure it helps with a ranking.
Well, let me ask you this then. To your observation, would it be helpful just to have the traditional pro forma, and then more of a summary by program, so that you see salaries operating, so you know what all the programs are, but you don't get into all the line number detail, and it's there for background if you wanted to understand a little bit more relative to what you're pointing to.
That can work.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't see any great problem with that, other than, we also are not taking credit for having created this thing, so I think there might be some ownership people who don't want to see it.
Are we going to do that open
I'm fine with
government
whatever.
thing?
Yeah.
Nikki is, I think if it hasn't already done it, is working on it.
When are we all going to get our accounts?
Okay, pardon?
When are we getting our accounts so we can have access?
I will talk to her first thing tomorrow morning.
I've heard that a month ago.
Well, I know she's been,
The open governments thing is, it's not loaded, but I think that could be a very useful tool. It allows you to be up at a very aggregate level with charts and pie charts and bar charts,
Yeah.
or dig right down, and it allows you to do the what-ifs. We never do what-ifs. I mean, we focus on community grants, how big should that be, and more lately on the CIP. We never change any of the things. What if we gave fire less? and
No, I
police more?
think it's worth, I mean, it's worth doing, and it's for our constituents, it shows, in a way, this process a little less,
Mhm.
opaque, but I think, to your point, I think Joe's, I agree with Joe. I mean, I do think we've gotten away in the last couple of years from the whole dog and pony show of each department head talking, but what has happened in the intervening time is we got a lot of different department heads that we
Yeah.
had. So, when you heard David Gerald 5 times do the same spiel, you knew kind of what you were gonna get. I think it's useful to have that on the books, even if we do the one day crash thing. I think it's good for the council, it's good for the department heads, and as you point out, in December, you could have a very different makeup of the council, and having that as the framework that the finance committee is used to doing again, probably makes some sense to have it, to do it this year, so it's the precedent going forward. So, that's just my
No, I agree.
2 cents.
That's why I raised it
Yeah,
in Joe's absence.
exactly. And Joe's gonna run it, so we'll
Yeah,
all be we'll be off somewhere. Okay. Any other items or?
Yeah, I want to tell you
Yes.
about my GFOA meeting and go through all of the, actually, there was one interesting thing from the
Are we
GFO.
just shooting the breeze, or are we having a finance committee meeting?
No, this is finance.
He's gonna come
One
up
of the
with it,
issues in the
Make it quick.
city is workforce housing. And one of the things that Baltimore did with their big development down there by, Fells Point, it isn't really Fells, Federal Hill, is they use TIF money to finance workforce housing, which may be, I mean, we are gonna have a hard time finding where that housing could go, but that would be a way of financing it. So, there was a lot, I could go on for hours about that meeting. Good to quickly take over the Eastport Shopping
Yeah,
Center.
there you go. Tiff.
TIF, tax incentive funds. Yeah, incremental financing.
Go ahead, Fred.
I move that we adjourn.
Is there a second?
I want to discuss.
Roll call vote. All in favor? Aye.
Call the question.
Meeting
Aye.
adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Reconsider